Earlier this week, I had just returned from a long journey. I was exhausted, worn out by back-to-back intercontinental flights, by having no time for my spiritual practice, by disrupted healthy eating, and by the tangled, unresolved conflict between my private emotional life and my passion for my profession. Whenever I find myself mentally unsettled or completely drained after healing sessions that require tremendous amounts of vital energy and inner strength, I usually go to the harbor pier near the fish market in Hamburg. There, I relax, meditate, and restore myself. For me, all I need is a quiet corner with open skies, turquoise water, and the gentle murmur of waves. After spending about an hour there, I can usually restore my vitality and inner balance, as though I had never been disturbed or emotionally wounded. I normally visit the harbor on Friday afternoons whenever I'm not traveling. But this particular week, I went on a Tuesday afternoon instead. Winter had already arrived. Darkness came early, the wind was fierce, and the temperature had dropped below 5 degrees Celsius, 41 degrees Fahrenheit. I couldn't explain why I felt so restless or why I had such a strong urge to go to the harbor, despite the kind of weather that only a crazy person would choose for sitting outside in the cold wind. That afternoon, far more seagulls than usual circled overhead. They cried and screeched wildly across the sky as though something unusual had happened. I paid them little attention. After finishing my meditation and energy practice, I gazed at the waves, searching for inspiration and piecing together verses for my poem Pirate 4. I claim to be a pirate who only slashes at the wind, but in truth, the sea has already torn me apart. As I drifted into thoughts of someone far away beyond the endless ocean, a seagull suddenly swooped down beside me. Seagulls are normally very timid birds. They may circle densely above fishing boats or briefly land on the rocks along a harbor, but they rarely approach people the way pigeons do in Europe's major cities. I was surprised when this seagull landed right beside me. It stared at me with wide, round eyes and let out soft, friendly chirps. I stepped closer. Instead of flying away, it crouched low to the ground as if it were waiting for me. I reached out, pretending to catch it. Still, it didn't fly away. Curious, I gently picked it up. To my surprise, I discovered that both of its legs had become tightly entangled in a bundle of nylon fishing line. After removing the tangled strands, I realized that one leg was broken near the ankle joint. I always carry a brown leather bag with me, containing a complete set of basic medical supplies. Using a roll of red athletic tape and a wooden tongue depressor split into small pieces, I carefully fashioned a splint and bandaged the bird's injured leg. When I finished, I set it back on the ground and gently shooed it away. But it refused to fly. Instead, it looked up at me again with those large, round eyes, softly chirping from its beak. So I picked it up once more, looked directly into its eyes, and spoke to it as though speaking to another human being. Don't be afraid. You'll be all right. This tape will gradually soften when it gets wet, and it'll eventually fall off by itself. By the time your leg has healed, the tape will have dissolved enough to come away naturally. Strangely enough, this time the injured seagull suddenly soared high into the sky, letting out a series of bright, joyful cries. I smiled, quietly pleased by this little song of the sea. Although I found the whole encounter unusual, I didn't dwell on it. Over the years, I had become accustomed to the silent, wordless ways animals communicate. What truly left me speechless happened the following morning. As I sat drinking tea on my balcony, I heard a familiar, cheerful cry coming from the small garden outside my apartment. I looked up in disbelief. Among the flock of circling seagulls was one bird with a bright red bandage wrapped around its leg. Even more astonishing, it was carrying a tiny fish in its beak, no larger than a finger. It flew over my garden, gently dropped the little fish into the yard, and only then rejoined the rest of its flock. I walked downstairs, picked up the fish, and stared at it in amazement, countless questions swirling through my mind. What kind of programming of thought and language could possibly explain this? Holding the tiny dead fish, I found myself reflecting on the endless cycle of survival in nature. Human beings feast upon the flesh of countless animals, celebrating it as the art of fine cuisine. Yet how many of us realize that, from the perspective of the animal kingdom, humans may well be the most terrifying predators on this blue planet? To that seagull, the little fish swimming beneath the clear water was a precious gift that ensured its survival. To that fish, even smaller shrimp and tiny creatures were themselves the art of living, consumed so that it, too, could survive. I don't claim to fully understand what happened with that seagull, nor do I wish to embellish the story simply to preach vegetarianism. Every living being possesses its own form of awareness. What truly changed me was something else. After that day, I found that I could no longer bring myself to eat seafood. Previously, although I had stopped eating meat, I would occasionally eat fish or shrimp to supplement my energy while performing intensive healing practices. Now, however, I felt uncomfortable, even repulsed by the thought of putting such food into my mouth. Perhaps some people would consider me old-fashioned, eccentric, or stubborn. But to me, this choice brings peace to my conscience. As for that unfortunate seagull, this was not the first time I had experienced something extraordinary with animals. When I was 4 or 5 years old, I was swept away by floodwaters while playing outside. Had our family's brindle dog not plunged into the raging current and dragged me safely back to shore, I would have died that day. Since then, I have regarded animals as dear friends. Perhaps because of that experience, I have always found it especially difficult to accept people who eat dog meat. Through years of cultivating various forms of Qigong and health-preserving practices rooted in unconditional compassion, I believe I have gradually developed a kind of protective energy field. At certain moments, entirely without conscious intention, that energy seems to radiate outward and creates a silent form of communication with the world around me. Animals, whose instincts are finely tuned to subtle energetic vibrations, appear able to recognize and respond to that protective field with remarkable ease. I have no logical explanation for this kind of silent communication. I certainly never consciously program myself to communicate with animals. I do not receive spoken words from them because I do not understand their language. Yet somehow, through whatever subtle energy they perceive, they seem to understand who I am.